Yeah.
Let's start out with some just short introductions by people. Most of you know each other already by this time, but not quite everybody. Richard, let's start out with you, the old timer.
We're all old timers. Richard Mayman. Good morning. I'm up in Portland, Maine. And this is, I think I've taken every course that Forrest has offered
Every course, yeah, you're my most faithful.
since 1963.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Lance.
Yes, I'm Lance Yateman. I've taken several courses online with Forrest, and I just want to comment that I always feel a lot smarter at the very end of the course than I do going into the course.
Good. Okay, Lucy.
Hi, I'm Lucy Miziolik, and I've taken several courses over the last 2 or 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
And I live in Forrest's neighborhood and don't see enough of him around, but that's the way it is with everybody these days. I also struggle with this, but I enjoy philosophy and giving it a good try. And I get a lot from what I hear from everyone in the class that I've been in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just gives me a better understanding of this kind of thought, these experiments or whatever they are. And I also am always shocked at how relevant these old people are to today. It just blows me away that we don't seem to learn or something. I don't know, whatever. So there it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tony?
Yes, I'm Tony Wilson, and I've survived a few of these courses, and I'm sorry that I missed one or two. I'm forcing my brain cells to do things it's not used to with all this. And Richard, hello. I had a place on Neal Street in Portland for a while, my favorite place.
You're kidding. No.
No. I've spent quite a bit of time there, so I envy you.
I used to live
here in Oxford.
Now you're in Oxford. Is that what you just said?
Yes, I'm in Oxford now.
Okay.
And Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charlie Yonkers, and I'm a neighbor of Forrest and good friend. I could reach his house with a couple of Jack Nicklaus's drives. And we're a part of a chat group, and I've been taking Forrest classes for years now too. Always illuminating because he's a student of a branch of knowledge that I'm not. I'm more of a historian. He's more of a philosopher. That makes for a nice mix. But I have been familiar with this topic. I know this is probably a sensitive area since I read The Swerve way back when, in Stephen Greenblatt's book, and had taken a course in Florence and learned a little bit about the Renaissance and so forth. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be back together with you all, many of whom I know and have shared time with.
Okay. Let's see. Mike?
Yes. I'm also a neighbor of Forrest. We all moved together to be close by. And in another life, I was a philosophy instructor or assistant professor of philosophy was my actual job title. I want to thank Forrest for one thing. In the 1970s, I studied a lot of history of philosophy, and Lucretius was essentially a footnote. The atomists were mentioned. They were never taken seriously, and I had never read Lucretius' original work, and I found it fascinating. And I'm really sorry that somehow in my philosophical education that this book was not a key document. I mean, I found it to be a wonderful book, and very happy that Forrest made it a subject of this class.
Hey, Steve, we can see you now.
And hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, can you introduce yourself a bit?
Yep, I'm Steve Carlo. This is my first course with you, Forrest. I'm looking forward to it. I just finished reading the Iliad and the Odyssey for a virtual book club, so I thought I'd make a switch.
Okay, so you could get some of the references that Lucretius makes.
I hope so.
Yeah, Ron.
I have, like others, have taken as many courses of Forrest as I was aware being available, and I've feel more and more with each course a member of a community of thinking people who appreciate classical thought and dive deeply into issues that are new to them, certainly new to me. And I appreciate another round of that. I'm looking forward to this course very much.
Okay, Eleonora.
Hi, good morning. I'm Eleonora, and I'm not a neighbor of Forrest, so I'm in St. Michael's. This is my second course with Forrest, and I signed for this first because of the instructor, of course, but also about the most of you, because I really enjoyed discussing with you in the last class, and I was expecting that I'll see some of you again, even when we disagree on it. It was really a good discussion. So I didn't really put that much thought into the class. I didn't read the instruction ahead. So I'm really back on reading and I'm not really prepared. So I didn't know what to expect. And now that I'm into that, I'm really surprised. And I don't know why you, Forrest, choose this particular topic, but we can talk about it. That surprised me. Thank you.
Okay, Bob.
My name is Bob Donnelly, and I am leasing the technical equipment from my wife, who who has more technology experience than I have. I surrendered my experience in broadcast materials and stuff like that, and some journalism a long time ago. So I find this stuff very, very interesting, and it brings back a lot of old memories, um, and the thoughts going back to when I was in the fifth grade, and I can remember getting in trouble with the teacher because I was constantly walking around to the world books and I'm pulling out the books and then the Ulysses and the rest. And she said, we're not doing that. I said, well, I am, because I seem to be learning more than anybody else in this classroom. Needless to say, I got a little trouble. I had to go to the principal. But anyway, this is great stuff. I just love it.
Okay, good. And Mike Landau.
Yeah, I took your previous course, the one you did last semester, and found it very interesting. I'm terminally curious about everything. And so this piqued my interest because I think it's very relevant given today's environment and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, well, let's get into it. First, I like us to kind of review, especially since not everybody has been on top of this. But today I thought we'll just work on book one, and then I hope by next time you will have read books 2 and 3, and we can get into them. And then I've sent you just a few suggestions for 4, 5, and 6, but we won't deal a great deal with them at all. The big focus will be on 1, 2, and 3. So I thought I'd start out by saying that at first it might just seem kind of crazy that way back in the 5th century, actually, before the Common Era, some Greeks who seem to be involved a lot. The Greeks seem to be involved a lot in philosophy. Some of them. Some came up with the idea of atomism, and that must just seem kind of bizarre. That way back then, someone would think that the ultimate reality was atoms. For Lucretius, it's not just Epicurus, but Epicurus, and we know from fragments of referrals by other people later on that there was a thinker named Democritus before him and Leucippus before him that also were thinking this way, that the ultimate reality was atoms. Now, how in the world would they have come up with this notion?
We're talking pre-marijuana, right?
I'm not going to call on people, just pitch right in.
For some reason, when I think of atoms, I think of energy. And so I just feel like, that's what we are. We're all, forces of energy, and so is so much else. But that's what I think of when I think of atoms: energy and movement and feeling, and so things bumping into each other and just energy. So I don't know why. Maybe that was what the Greeks.
Yeah,
I've been thinking about that very question, and I don't have an answer, but I've marveled at what Lucretius wrote and what Epicurus was able to resolve in his own mind, how close it is to what we now think of as the world, the universe, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's rather relatively astonishing that he came up with that. I'd love to hear if anybody knows how he came up with that. That is Epicurus.
Yeah, I didn't know what the etymology of the word atom is in Greek and where it might have dawned on somebody to connect the two words in the concept. I personally, we used to keep a giant compost pile in the back of our property, which I loved to break down over time, and we would add all the new stuff at one end and from the kitchen and the garden and things like that, biodegradable stuff. And then we would flip it a windrow. And all the new stuff would eventually disappear. That is, it would be beautiful, beautiful, granular compost at the old end, so to speak. And that's what we would put on the garden. But all the eggshells and all the banana peels and everything like that had broken down and disappeared. And so it kept getting smaller and smaller, and the beautiful stuff that you wanted to use was at the aged end of the windrow. And that was my personal experience on things breaking down, and getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But I kept looking in the text for some sort of experiential. And he does use the word ashes in some places, and dust. And so I was looking for that connection to reach towards the ultimate, but I don't see how they got there to atoms.
And actually, Lucretius knows a lot about farming, doesn't he? He gives many, many examples. And that would be right up his alley, Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about lambs and the birth of lambs and calves and cattle, how they behave and so on. I must tell you that when I read his references several times throughout this long poem about lambs being frisky, when we lived in England, which we did for over 10 years, we lived for part of that, most of that time, we lived right next to a field where a farmer left a big manure pile, and the lambs would, in lambing seasons, the lambs would climb up on that and we would see them jumping up and down and frisking around and bumping each other. And if you've never seen lambs, you've really missed out on something. And clearly, Lucretius is delighted by that kind of scene because he brings it up again and again. But coming back, Lucretius says at some point that the reason that we can know that atoms exist, that this is based on our sense perceptions. Now, he also says the atoms are invisible, so you can't see atoms. So what in the world can he mean by saying that we know about atoms because through our sense perceptions? Charlie has given an example. What other examples?
Well, he says you can't see wind either, but we know there's wind.
Yeah, okay, wind is an example he gives. I just want us to fill in on this background so it doesn't seem so bizarre.
He does at some point talk about dust motes as being barely visible as kind of basic elements of so extrapolating from what we can see to what we can't see, I guess, is not that big a leap for him.
Okay.
Of course, this all begs the question, I think, of all right, this is Lucretius's take on it, but I guess we really have no way of comparing Lucretius with Epicurus, right? Because Epicurus writing, there's not a lot of it extant. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
Right.
So we're depending upon Lucretius' take on Epicurus. Okay.
Plus a lot of other fragments. Apparently, Epicurus wrote quite a bit, but most of it has gotten lost, either at the big fire in Alexandria or wherever. But we do have other people who refer back to him also. But Lucretius is the only kind of long piece that we have about Epicurean philosophy.
Yeah, we also have in this first chapter, I think, at least the mention of several Greek philosophers, Heraclitus, Empedocles, and Anaxagoras, who were positing and developing schools of thought about what material fundamentals underlay and could be used to explain the world that we see and feel and touch. And so there was a dialogue, there was a discourse, there were theoreticians dealing with different solutions, but focusing on the same issue, the same scientific problem or challenge, as it were, and all of them trying to make arguments for what it was that was most fundamental, what was most essential and real, underlying the everyday reality that we operate in. So it was involving himself in this discourse, I think, which stimulated Epicurean thinking in the direction of atoms. I mean, to some extent he's borrowing, but to some extent he's going beyond and differentiating. He's certainly critiquing his precursors.
Yeah, but I'm asking you. I mean, this is the sort of question I don't usually ask, but I'm doing it because I want us to review this. That what else do we see that might lead us to think about there being atoms? What would the Greeks have seen that would say, "Oh, gee,
maybe there's some
very tiny particles."
Maybe there's some practical things here. These folks were agricultural. They had to be. It was absolutely necessary that they learn how to maintain through the years.
And he refers to the seed.
Right, exactly. There's this whole concept of seed, but there's another concept, and is the um, temperatures. And this guy was he looked at something about physics. I think got him to really think about where does that come from? Where does the heat come from? How much heat do you need to do something with bronze, which I believe is one of the metals at the time that was practical or considered practical? And that's what got me about this is that he was trying to explain to the reader, people who are looking at this stuff, just how um, practical it is, and he's looking for bargains, so to speak. It's like going to Target and buying he's trying to figure out, what device can I buy here? How useful is it? And is it big or small? And how do we control it? How do we make it useful? And I gotta believe I'd like to believe that these folks are not only poets and artists, but they're also very concerned about weaponry, about military existence, etc. And maybe
But Bob, how do you go from there all the way back to atoms?
if I were sitting at a campfire and I saw the pieces of wood or stone flying, being burned, and seeing this and really these are observant people. They didn't just say, "Well, I'm going. It's too hot." They wanted to know how much heat is there, and what can that heat do in the way of progress or in the way of damage. I mean, they were
And
trying
how do
to
we
really know.
interact with that heat? What is our sense of
Any other
that?
examples that he gives? Lance mentioned wind, and
Sunshine.
Charlie has talked about manure decaying.
When he talks about odors in general as
Right,
being
right.
invisible, but being there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he saw things you had prior to him, you had philosophers saying everything is fire, everything is wind, everything. Then he went down, then there were the four elements, I think, was fire, wind, and water, and stone, or maybe
Earth.
but he saw things. So there was a general idea in Greek philosophy that you had to get down to fundamentals. That was what they were always trying to do. But when you see things decaying, as some of us have already talked about, and changing, then it's hard to keep to those fundamentals. So the atomists came up with this idea that, well, there's something that is not changing, and that's an atom. And what do you see? You see the organization of atoms changing, but not the atoms themselves.
Right.
So you still had something fundamental, but something that was fundamental and could change. I think that may have led some of them to think about atoms. I'm guessing.
Yeah, but the discovery of manure is much less impressive than the concept of atoms. And I just don't see how you get from one to the other. I don't know that this is an answerable question. I'd probably, if I were actually in college and had the professor ask me that, I think I'd say to him, there's no answer to that, sir. But
also the concept.
just let me just say what also I found amazing in reading Lucretius, who I had never heard of.
One of the kids.
Knew Epicurus, but not Lucretius. And the idea of an infinite universe with no center. I mean, discovered 500 BC. Copernicus comes up with a modified, very modified version of that hundreds of years later. It's quite remarkable, I think.
One of the observations that I had that struck me was this notion that you can't really destroy matter. That the amount of atoms is kind of fixed and it can be changed, right? It can configure in different ways. To me, it's like watching a fire, that you're feeding logs into a fire, for hours, and all you have is a small amount of ash. What happened to the rest of it? Where did it go? How did it get converted? So it had to become something. And I think that idea kind of struck me, that you're constantly converting atoms into other things.
Okay, let me give a couple of other examples that you haven't mentioned that Lucretius does. One, he talks about a rain comes and the pavement, because they had stone walks. The pavement is all filled with water, and then the sun comes out and slowly it disappears. Now that's an everyday occurrence, and yet you don't see the water disappearing into the air, but it does nonetheless. So what happens must be invisible. It's just very tiny little things that are going from water to air. And another example, you go to visit the temple, and there where you enter the temple, you see that little by little the entrance gets worn down. But you never see any little pieces come off of that. It's all practically invisible, but there must be tiny, 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 tiny bits that are wearing away. And another example, besides the wind, is you smell things, but you don't see any smells coming your way, and yet there you are, you smell the garlic or whatever it is. And so there must be some tiny particles that are coming off of things. And even with taste, you see the meat or the vegetables or whatever, but where is the taste in them? That must come. Am I muted?
No, we're just speechless. Where does
that come from? But he gives a lot of everyday examples where there are tiny, tiny things like Lance's. We don't see Lance's hair get grayer and grayer. It only happens little bits by bit. And
First, at least I do have some hair.
Bald all at once. It only happens little by little. So there are a lot of ways in which, in everyday experience, people thinking about what ultimate reality would be, there are a lot of everyday perceptions that would kind of lead to this kind of thinking. So it's not so far out. Does that make more sense?
All right. So he's seeing what are really effects, and he's positing causes. He has, and like most of the Greeks, maybe not Aristotle, but he's not an experimental scientist. He only has words and logic to explain the things. The power of his logic. It must be this, and obviously, if Lucretius is capturing Epicurus accurately, Epicurus was absolutely certain that everybody else was wrong and he was right.
Right.
That's what gets me. That there's nothing tentative about this. He's considered the other explanations. They're just a lot of BS, and this is the way we should understand reality, the
To
way
me,
things are.
most
Nora?
interesting to me, very interesting was not just atoms, so not just materialism, but if you will, dialectical materialism that we see later in Marx, which was maybe to explain the social change. Here it was to explain the world, the nature in itself. So for me, that was more striking than just the structure, but the movement and the change. But I was very surprised that with that thought that he had, that he would still see and entertain the thought of void, and that he would not see, and I understand that trying to explain how the atoms are moving and changing. So, but to not understand that even the void is consisting of particles, that was a little bit weird for me.
But he turns out to be right.
Well, but is there a void in the world?
More or less.
Well,
And can it be considered a void if it has, finite atoms
well, he said that the atoms couldn't move unless
without
it
the
was a
void? Right.
So that's
But the void has atoms too.
Or
It's not
particles?
really a void, right?
well, I think that's more modern thought, Tony, than what he thought of.
So let me share with you how my thought process worked going through this book one. Let's start with the atom, and as finite as possible, as nothing comes from nothing. But within the atom is the spirit, created by the atom. And the spirit, therefore, is a byproduct that is destructible of the atom. So therefore, if the spirit, and the spirit could be the feeling the heat from the fire or the humidity in the rain, that spirit is created by the atoms, right? You have to have atoms in order to create the spirit. So if the atoms cannot be destroyed, but the spirit is gone in afterlife, then the atoms of that life are redistributed back into nature. But do those atoms that are redistributed into nature contain the same ability to create that that spirit? Since it was the source of the spirit, right? You can't have a spirit without the atoms to create the spirit. You can't have a fire without the atoms.
Tony, I'm going to interrupt you because I think we better wait on talking about the soul spirit until the second and third book, because book one doesn't really tell us much about that. I mean, it's asserted, but we don't. Lucretius doesn't get into the details until the second and third book about that. So if you don't mind, I'd like us to postpone that discussion.
Okay, but he does refer to it on page 23.
Yeah. I know it's mentioned, but it's not really developed.
Yeah. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is in connection with your comments about how do we know that those atoms are there? Can we feel it in the fire? And so what we're feeling is actually a byproduct of those atoms, right?
Yes.
What we're deriving from is a byproduct, right? But the byproduct is destructible.
Mm-hmm. What he does tell us in book one is that there are only two realities, two fundamental concepts: matter and void.
Right.
And matter is made up of these indestructible atoms, and the void is the space between atoms. And there is no third thing. There's no other element in this cosmology that he's envisioning. I think it's also the case, interestingly, that as you read on, and I think if it's not in book 1, it's in book 2, he believes that atoms, they only move downward. They move at speeds exceeding the speed of light, but always downward. This is a universe that has a top and a bottom. It doesn't have elliptical orbits for anything.
So are you referring to gravity?
I'm sorry.
Is this a reference to gravity?
No. Well,
moving downward?
It's the natural state of atoms to move downward. And so he has to justify how it seems that sometimes his atoms are moving upward. How does it happen that flames leap upward? How does it happen that trees grow upward, etc.? So he takes a couple of pages to actually argue and to integrate these apparent falsifying events into his theory of atoms that only move in the one direction downward. And there are other instances where he's extremely protective and defensive about the first principles that he's positing. I mean, these are the characteristics of a scientific mind when it's challenged, when it has to integrate fundamental propositions or concepts with facts that apparently refute it or certainly challenge it. So, I mean, the question about where did this all come from, whether it was concepts and ideas that about atoms that came first, or whether the notion of atoms were derived from empirical observations, I think that he's a theoretical thinker. He's certainly protective of his theory. He's trying to reconcile it with facts that seem to run contrary to it.
But like most of the philosophers that Forrest has been teaching us, he postulates an essence. There's a natural essence, and I think his natural essence is Mother Nature as it goes on. And he repeats that many, many times within this text. It's the essence, the natural essence.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have that, I mean, then of course, a lot of these, almost every philosopher's theory would fall apart. You have to accept, I think, and work with what they are telling you is the essence. And that's most especially true, I think, of Lucretius here. I'm reading it over and over again as I look at my notes. That's what he says it is. But how he got from that to the atom, I don't know, and how he then postulates the existence of people on other planets as you go later into his discourse, I really don't know, and I'm just amazed at it, and I think it's astonishing.
I found myself using the metaphor, if you will, of a virgin forest, as in California, say, and along comes a wildfire, a bolt of lightning. Energy is inserted into the natural forest, and it sets it on fire. Man is not involved in this at all. Fire spreads, and the forest burns down. So what seemed to be matter in the form of giant redwoods and so forth is reduced to ash on the ground. Well, everything has been broken down smaller and smaller and smaller and descends back into the earth. But so he could have thought that, well, the particles of the big trees are now ash that settles into the ground, and lo and behold, the next spring up comes some little shoots of grass or shoots of trees, and they grow up over time, unaided by man, into matter again. So the matter that was there at the beginning was reduced by flame and smoke and ash and things of that sort, which all fell back down into the forest and then rose up again. So in the grand scheme of things, over 1,000 years or so forth, the virgin forest went up and down and up and down, and the same thing was always there. So what was going on, he might have asked himself. Well, where he came up with the idea of, this tiniest speck of being is an atom, I don't know, but everything kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and then resurging. And whether that's helpful or not, it was to me as I read his various physical examples.
Forrest, the question for you.
What's equivalent to the
Laura?
The question, what is confusing for me, for somebody who is like really in detail dealing with atoms and the structure, and why he would consider the death as an end, why he would not think, if he says that the atoms are indestructible, what is his thinking, like where those atoms are going after person dies, or person or animal or I don't know, a plant? Why his thinking was not extending into a modification and whatever, a rebirth, if you will.
Well, this is he
Well,
introduces.
what would have created the atoms?
Well, that's
Question doesn't mean anything because they're infinitely old.
Yep.
They're infinite.
I don't think he ever addresses that question.
They're indestructible.
Yes, it does. Yeah,
does.
yeah. How did the atoms come into existence?
Oh God, I missed that part.
Like the beginning of time, the Big Bang, carbon.
Swerve or whatever.
Is that question going to be on the test?
This is the test.
Nothing can come from nothing.
Right. Second law of thermodynamics.
Well, if there was an essence to begin with that gets reduced from a tree to an ash to a germ to a cell to a seed, and it grows back, then the essence is always there. And so it may be, it's accumulated matter may change over time, but it cycles back. So also with a human being's bones and ashes descend back into the soil and eventually become nourishment for plants that help other spirits.
But that's life too. It's not a death.
Right.
Yeah, but the spirit isn't there.
If spirit has
Soul.
atoms, like
Soul
spirit
and
should
the
also
spirit.
be into something, right? If he
Okay.
says that even the spirit has atoms, so it doesn't disappear.
And the spirit is something, and something is atoms. But he says that the spirit disappears.
No.
The atoms can never disappear.
Right. They disperse.
Yes.
Because
Doesn't he
That's
say
why
for them to disappear, they would have to become nothing. Nothing can become nothing. He has these two principles in book 1.
But
Nothing can come from nothing, and nothing can become nothing.
Doesn't he talk about the senses? If the senses
Yeah, I was just gonna
you no
say that.
longer have any
Senses.
sense,
The senses are
that's
something.
right. But when you can no longer smell, touch, feel, see after you've died, then
It's gone.
it's gone. And but the atoms that made you up are converted into something else, whether it's decay or heat or other atoms. Maybe your atoms break down, but the total sum of those things hasn't changed.
So Forrest, this is the point I was trying to make, is that
Okay.
the atoms can be destroyed. I mean, the atoms cannot be destroyed, but what the atoms produce can be destroyed.
Sure,
And the configuration
Yeah.
can change.
Mhm.
sure.
Right.
We're all going to die one day.
Period.
Yeah. I'll die sooner than you, probably, unless there's disease or accident or something. So we're all going to die. But what does that mean? It means that this particular collection disappears.
Yes.
Some people have their bodies cremated. Some modern people have their bodies just put in the ground, which is probably what people did eons ago. But that doesn't mean that everything disappears. It only means that that particular collection disappears.
That's
But
right.
you see,
And then
In chapter 2,
the body
he seems to
feeds.
introduce I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Ron?
I was saying that in chapter 2, to reconcile everlasting and indestructible atoms and his theory with constant change and transformation, birth, death, decay, he creates the very modern notion of a molecule, a collection of atoms which are held together by little hooks or connected in some other way. Maybe they're little eyelets in them in some atoms and hooks in others, and they combine. And their combination and their decomposition is what we witness as the transformation processes in nature. He's quite explicit about this. He goes through a litany of examples, and when he's trying to describe the characteristics and the what shall I say, the attributes of his atoms. One important attribute is this adhesion, this connectivity capability between atoms. And
why can't atoms disappear? The collection, as Tony says, our collection of atoms can disappear as a collection, but the atoms themselves can't disappear.
Right.
Because they are indestructible. Atom means not destructible. So they are indestructible. Why?
Because it's matter.
Well, he posits a lot of things. He doesn't start with empirical facts. He doesn't even he's not even able to reconcile elements of his theory one with another. I mean, he believes these things. These are fundamental.
Yeah, that's true.
Tenets.
But and he ends, Ron, with always with these words, from their essential nature.
Yes,
that's scattered throughout.
Yes.
So again, you have to accept that that's his concept of the essence of things.
Well, and he wants everyone to believe that they can take comfort in the fact that while their spirit might disappear, if they understand that they're a part of the natural way of evolution and the natural way of being, that in itself should be comforting.
Right. That's right. I mean, this is all about, at the end of the day, this is all about providing a knowledge base to people who are concerned about and are anxious about living in a world where there's a lot of transformation and change, where there are a lot of destructive forces, where war and pestilence and famine and other things break out from time to time. And maybe he's combating the traditional notion that these things are induced by activist gods that have their own agendas and their own preferences, and they're arbitrary and have nothing to do with human interests. He's making an argument, a foundation for an argument against that kind of what shall I say, human awareness, human comfort.
Well, he's arguing against superstition, as superstition makes us miserable.
Right.
He's also saying something about, death. Death is not to be feared. It's just simply a transformation.
Yes.
Your senses have gone away, but the materials have not. They're just transformed into something else, not to be feared.
But the most important thing to most human beings is the spirit of their mind and their soul. And he's saying that is destructible. And so he wants you to take comfort in the fact that the material part of the human being is a part of the natural way of the way things happen naturally.
And Tony,
is that comforting?
But Tony, to your point, that's to me why it's amazing that book wasn't burned in 1400.
In modern times, we now know that the atom is not the final thing, don't we? There are subatomic particles and ions and photons and all those kinds of things, the Higgs thing, whatever. Anyway,
and quantum field theory
seem to be trying to do the same sort of thing that in some ways Lucretius and the Epicureans were doing. They're trying to find what is the ultimate reality, and it's still a question. Are there particles? Are there waves that are fundamental? Is it, as Lucy said earlier, energy? Scientists, it's a big question still, but nobody is saying, oh, this is all stupid. There isn't any fundamental thing, because all the scientists agree that there must be, but it's just hard to figure out what it is.
Right. Forrest, can I go back to a question you asked earlier?
Sure, yeah.
You asked, why is it that atoms cannot disappear? And atoms from nothing, nothing can come from nothing.
Right.
So if atoms disappear, where do you get more atoms from? I mean, that's a thought, that's a logic argument. Of course, remember from previous classes, we all talked about the absurdity of philosophers sitting in lounge chairs and thinking up this stuff. But he's a classic case of that. I mean, this is all from his head, and it's pretty impressive for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So if the atoms disappeared, then where did they come from?
Right.
No, one can make the argument, you say you can't, destroy these atoms, but at the same time, at the beginning of the universe, there were no atoms. It was zero.
There's no beginning to the universe. There can't be, because nothing.
But we didn't have atoms.
Nothing could come from nothing. So
simply put, it's dust to dust or atom to atom.
But we did create, the atoms came into existence.
No, I don't
300 million. Yeah, they did. Originally, there was no atomic material.
Okay, but there
for 300 million years.
Lucretius isn't going there, though. He doesn't pursue that question. But the logic of his first principle, that nothing comes from nothing, is that there could have been nothing. there could not have been nothing.
But if you follow that, then you'd say the Big Bang had to be something specific in existence before the rest of this stuff got evolved. All I'm saying is it may be that at the end of time, wherever that may be, that even atoms get destroyed into something else. You cycle. That's a possibility.
Right. Well, modern science has gone has not accepted that conclusion, as it were, and has tried to figure out. But Lucretius, I don't think, is concerned about that. He's dealt with it. Nothing comes from nothing. End of story.
Mike, if you talk about the Big Bang, there's something that bangs. The Big Bang is something.
Right.
True, but when if you at least some of the readings I've done, you have these infinitesimally small periods of time where lots of stuff got created, if you will, and the whole idea of atoms, hydrogen atom as being maybe one of the first, didn't seem to exist before 300 million years. It took like almost 300 million years for whatever the heat was and whatever to create those atoms that we now rely on. Kind of makes up the universe. So there was a period of time in there that was kind of.
But where did those come from?
I don't know.
In Lucretius' world, the atom is it. And he says at the top of page 27, beyond all doubt, there must be things possessed of an immortal essence. Nothing can disintegrate entirely into nothing. I mean, that's it.
And then something could not become nothing, right? So atoms do not die, people do not die. I mean, you can be reborn into something else, but you still exist. Your genetic material goes and...
We just don't call it people.
And I know he was so much against religion, but when you think about it, it's so much Buddhism into that.
Well,
it struck me after reading the books 1 and 2 that this could have been entitled "It Is What It Is." I had a client who used to say that repeatedly. It is what it is.
Yeah, it became a common thing. Yeah, common saying. Let's switch to the void. We haven't talked much about the void. Why does he posit that
there's a reason for that?
Void?
Yeah.
That's where the atoms work.
I think we've been avoiding the void because what can you say about the void?
Well, I think he sort of suggests that the atoms need to move someplace. As the atoms move, there has to be space in which they can move.
Yeah.
And if there was no void, nothing could move. You'd have no heat. You'd have that part of it wouldn't exist.
No, and he's got this north-south cosmology. There's up and there's down, and there's no center. There's so the void is left behind as all the atoms fall to the bottom of this universe. And in fact, some of them fall beyond that bottom and create additional new universes so that we're stacked on top of each other. He mentions that as well. So there are, where you have more atoms congregating, you have more obstacles and constraints for new atoms to run into as they're falling to the bottom of their universe and beyond, spilling out the bottom, I guess, starting a new universe. And it's that density aspect of lots of atoms crowding together that translates into more collisions, more slower speeds, etc. But at the top of the rack is an openness, is less obstruction, less friction, as it were. So he's got this
speaking
up and down notion that, and so he doesn't have a theory of gravity except that there's a right direction for atoms to move in, and initially they're all streaming parallel to each other downward.
Yeah, Brian, I'm going to interrupt. So in our more immediate experience, not speaking about universes, in our more immediate experience, why should he think there must be a void?
Because the atoms need a place in which to operate.
They have to move.
They can't be in a nothing. They have to have some place in which to operate.
Well, I think it's deductive logic. He would think, based on the fact some objects are lighter and some objects are heavier, and the atom itself is solid, So there must necessarily be something in between. And I mean, I think it's a molecular theory he came up with. I think it's,
Yeah.
again, I think it's quite remarkable.
So some atoms are very close together, and so we get rocks and iron and so on, and then some are separated more, so that we get clouds, for instance, or we get a mist rising in the morning, and then we get things that are squishy, and then things which are not so squishy, and then things which seem quite solid, but nothing is actually totally solid. It's just that the things are so solid that it takes a lot for them to disintegrate. But with iron, rust comes along, or with stone, eventually over centuries, stone breaks down. There are earthquakes. There's lava coming out of Mount Vesuvius. So in order for there to be solidity or not solidity in objects, there must be a void. You follow the logic of that?
Mhm.
And so our bodies, which are composed of atoms, of course. I was looking for a quotation because I have a quotation from a Harvard Gazette article where some nuclear biologist or somebody is saying our bodies are composed of atoms. And I wanted that quote, but I don't have it handy. But anyway, our bodies disintegrate and they change over time. And we know that the cells that we have today are not the cells that we had, cells, that we had 20 years ago and that we had when we were children. Our cells are constantly changing. So for them to change, there's got to be a void. So do you follow the logic again behind that?
Yeah.
In many ways, Lucretius and the Epicureans are very logical thinkers.
Are they at war with magic? It seems to me in reading the book, I read the first three chapters, and I kept seeing the one thing that comes back is what they're trying to describe are things that in the common world outside the kind of world that Lucretius lived in.
Right.
And, there was an anti-void or something like that, where you're well, something that's happening in contemporary situations where we have a very clear scientific constantly being churned and turned around. That's something that Lucretius would probably like. But when it's being fought by what am I trying to think? Events or whatever that cause it to talk about things in a magical way. And magical is fun, but I don't think Lucretius was doing fun. I think he was doing a real good effort to get
Make sense of it. Yeah.
to get some sense of things, and that's what drew me across the book. I'm going to continue to read this because there's more here than just some kind of an act of magic, and where many people are comfortable living in, but in this world, I don't think that's a good idea. I think Lucretius has got a good start on. Unfortunately, he's not with us, but he has a good start on trying to look at things that are the real world that for some reason a lot of people reject. They don't want to see the real world. They want to see something magical. And
Mike,
I'm floating around here, so you have to forgive me.
but if you look at magic as being intervention by the gods, he is a theist. He talks about the existence of God.
Yeah, yeah.
But they don't interact with us, and they
Right.
don't.
They have no
interact with us.
influence on
They
on
have no influence.
They
So
lead the Epicurean life.
they sit on the mountain and eat and drink.
Right.
And leave us alone. So there are no mysterious forces, unexplainable forces coming into the world that we know of.
Well, now that we're all thoroughly depressed.
Well, trying to make sense of something that you can't make sense of.
Yeah, that's right.
And frankly, I don't accept that it's necessarily more comforting to believe that nothing dies than to accept a religious view that things do die but are somehow magically transformed into spirit, et cetera, et cetera. And frankly, religion persists because science offers explanations that many people either don't understand or nobody understands, including the scientists, ultimately, or nobody agrees upon, or they may, if there may be people who understand, but they still prefer a magical explanation of things. They still need that. They need that dimension in order to make sense of their lives.
The more I've listened to
that people do agree on.
Pardon? I'm sorry.
What are the things that people do agree on?
Atoms,
nature. That nature doesn't end. It keeps on going.
And that it's all interconnected.
There are simple physical principles that we observe in operation that probably most people agree are true, but that doesn't take us very far.
Where the atoms come from initially. Nothing from nothing, and you have
because
that came from nothing.
He doesn't address that, and that's why people prefer the Bible, the Book of Genesis. Although that still begs the question of where God comes from, of course. But,
or were homeschooled, however you got your early education. Weren't there some things that you could not doubt?
Oh, sure.
Or you were told not to doubt.
We can all agree, and I think everybody agrees that this is only one life that we have. I mean, you can be reborn, you can have a religious view that you're gonna, I don't know, go to heaven or to hell, but still,
or nothing.
This is the one thing that we have now, and
everything
else is.
I don't think
Pythagoreans believe that you died and then you were reborn again.
Yeah, but you won't be reborn like this. Like you are now, you're gonna be reborn into whatever.
Into something.
The more I listen to you guys,
My rhetorical question was really, we all learned that 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 3 = 5. At a right triangle, the hypotenuse is equal to the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the squares of the two sides, something like that. There's mathematics that nobody doubts unless you say that you're operating not in the tens but in the 12s or whatever that theory was.
But I think
the Greeks were cotton on very early. Think of the Pythagorean theory. That goes way back to Plato's time.
contemporary physical science tells us or believes that there are 6 or 7 constants. The speed of light, Planck's constant, etc. That if
But
they were different,
Ron, I'm
right?
thinking of not of science, but of something else. Well, the Greeks very early on got a sense that there were certain things we could think about logically. The Stoics even developed logic. And then there's Aristotelian logic. If A is larger than B and B is larger than C, then A must be larger than C. And so we have this ability to reason, and this is something that Lucretius banks on in his argument. You can't have atoms beginning, or otherwise you keep on going to what produced the atoms, and then what produced that thing, and what produced that thing. And he says, in effect, he doesn't use these words, but you have an infinite regress, which doesn't make any sense. You never get to anything. So you've got to get to something. You got to stop somewhere. And you stop somewhere where you stop, you say, okay, that's the beginning. And that couldn't come from nothing, because logically speaking, nothing can come from nothing. So there must be something that was forever and ever and ever, or else we wouldn't have anything.
Forrest, doesn't he also come up with the theory of evolution in this treatise? I'm looking at page 49 in the middle, where he says the atoms never began by forming a conscious pact, more likely being so many in many ways harassed and driven through the universe from an infinity of time by trying all kinds of motion, every combination. They came at last into such disposition as now establishes the sum of things. That sounds like a theory of evolution to me.
Well, he does.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact,
we'll get into that later.
Yeah, that's in later chapters.
During that time, were there people that thought that 2 and 2 plus 2 equaled 5? And so Lucretius studied or had the wherewithal to think about the logic of 2 plus 2 equals 4. But throughout mankind, there's been plenty of people that do not believe that, do not think that way. Was that going on then?
Say that, who do not think, well,
do not see the logic of 2 plus 2 equals 4. Some people think 2 plus 2 equals 5. In other words, reality was not prevalent, and so he was.
Those would be crazy people.
Yeah,
I mean, he says that again and again. Oh, that would be absurd. That would be crazy. That would be insane. He says that again and again about certain kinds of views.
Was he trying to make sense of that because during that time that was also the political upheaval? Is that possible?
No, I don't think so. Not that kind of reasoning. Some of it was just very practical. The Greeks became very excellent at building temples. There's the Parthenon and the Erechtheion and the temples to Zeus and Poseidon and so on. And they had to have real skills there. They had to know the stones and the nature of the stones and what could be carved. They had to know how things could be sustain weights. They had to design their architecture so that it worked.
And how the light of the sun hit the marble at certain angles.
I'm sorry, I didn't put my hearing aids in this morning.
And they even determined how the light from the sun impacted the different angles of the column and the structure.
Yeah. I mean, the skill that was involved in that was enormous. So they had a lot of practical wisdom, and they knew their mathematics.
But they also had some political wisdom, did they? They came up with the concept of dictator for life.
Yes.
Which could never happen here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there were non-believers in logic. There were people that did not believe or buy the logic of what you're describing.
But who could not believe in mathematics, the truths of mathematics?
I don't know.
Geometry. I mean, as he says, and as I've said just now, you'd have to be crazy.
Mm-hmm. Do we find that lots of people today do not believe in logic?
Who could not believe in logic? I don't know.
They'd have to be crazy.
I just spoke to someone who knows of somebody or talked to somebody that believes the earth is flat. And they have all sorts of reasoning for it. Of course, I don't believe that, but it's not through personal observation. It looks pretty flat to me. But there are people that believe that, so they dispense with certain logic.
Who said
logic and sense perception? There are clearly things that you'd have to be weird to believe. That if you believe that somebody went from childhood to old age overnight, does that make any sense? Even Rip Van Winkle had to sleep for 20 years. It didn't happen overnight.
Who said that consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds?
Oliver Wendell Holmes.
It was Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Emerson, but it was foolish consistency.
Oh, foolish consistency, right. That, there are people who believe that A and not A can be true simultaneously. I don't happen to agree with those people, but there are people out there who do that.
I mean, isn't that kind of, when we get into quantum physics, isn't that some of the postulates there? You open the box, the cat's alive. You open the box, the cat's dead. I mean,
yes.
So that is part of our reality too.
Yeah, I think the latest Quinnipiac poll said 40% of Americans believe 2 + 2 = 5.
40%.
Here we are. We've all come from different backgrounds. There are people with really many diverse backgrounds than ours because, we've all been brought up in at least the so-called Western tradition. And we can discuss things and we can argue with each other and we can agree on things and so on. How can we do all? We assume, I assume that you are all pretty intelligent people, that you all value learning, among other things. I mean, I hope we share a lot of other values as well that we don't need to talk about. But we have this small community and we are parts of a larger community. And so we have things in common, and the people who do not share what all of us here share, they are off in institutions someplace.
There's this concept of cognitive dissonance, Well, even when you know something's false, you still adhere to the falseness because you feel very uncomfortable changing your mind.
But at the same time, there are so many things that we don't know, right? Oh. And maybe that's why religion still exists, because science still could not give answers to many things, like what was before nothing, where is this going, how many universes whether stack on each other or not. Mm-hmm. So people turn towards the religion to get answers so it's understandable. You don't just have to be a crazy person if you ask questions, and we would not be in this class if we are not seeking for a truth. We are not here to learn something which is predetermined, so we're gonna just take it as it is. We are here to think, right?
But 99% of our fellow citizens would consider what we're doing here to be worthless.
Yes.
to their lives, meaningless to
That's
their
why they're
lives.
not here.
Well, they're not here because they consider it meaningless. I don't know where that, where that starts and ends. But so yes, we do share values, but those values, which include intellectual curiosity and a willingness to explore beyond what we already think we know. These are that's not this is not how most people live their lives anywhere.
Most people live their lives
Sadly,
through
but true, I think.
perception, not reality. It's mostly perception. You can get somebody that says, black is white, and if they say it 100 times, there's a certain percentage of people who believe it.
Right.
But it's good
Okay.
not to believe.
Well,
Yeah, you have to be skeptical about things.
People.
Okay, can we get back to Lucretius?
Yeah. Was he involved in a group like this, maybe?
Well, as a matter of fact, the Epicureans were noted for having small groups. For those of you who have had some of my classes before, you know that Plato founded the academy, and that continued for centuries after his death. Somebody else became the head, and somebody else, and so on. Aristotle founded the Lyceum, and then a little bit later, after I think Aristotle was still living, maybe, when Epicurus founded, also in Athens, a group called the Garden. And there he met with some other thinkers who were his students. And then shortly after that, or about contemporaneous with that, was a group called the Stoics, and they were kind of in competition with the Epicureans, and Lucretius doesn't like the Stoics, and some of his criticism of other thinkers is directed against the Stoics.
Yeah.
So there are these little groups, and then there were groups spotted all around the Aegean Sea of Epicureans. It was not a highly popular school, but there were quite a few other groups of Epicureans in other places. So, and it lasted up until the times of the Romans, and maybe even afterwards. We're not sure, but so yes, there was a school of Epicureans, and you can understand why, when Christianity came along, that they wouldn't have been very popular, because they did not believe in religion. But that does not mean, unlike Stephen Greenblatt, who wrote The Swerve that Charlie mentioned earlier, Stephen Greenblatt, although he won the Pulitzer Prize, what he wrote about medieval history was really scorned by medieval historians. They said he had a real bias. He talked about the medieval writers as if they were all into censorship and put Lucretius and the like onto their books to be banned, which doesn't make any sense with what the historians have found. And in fact, it doesn't make any sense with the fact that Lucretius, on the nature of things, got copied again and again and again in the monasteries. And that's why we have this book practically complete, as far as we know, that not complete as far as Lucretius meant it, but as far as what we have retained from ancient manuscripts. So Stephen
Forrest,
Greenblatt.
that may be
Stephen,
because
Stephen
of different.
Greenblatt is one of those atheists who wants to convert everybody else to atheism, and that's the flag that he waves. And he doesn't even really talk very much about Lucretius. How did I get off on that tangent?
Forrest, in class on that matter of copying certain works, I was reading Lucretius, and I saw familiar words and sounds to the way he was presenting his quote song, and he says, "And thence through seas and mountains and swift streams, through leafy homes of birds and greening plains, kindling the lure of love in every breast, thou bringest the eternal generations forth, kind after kind. And since 'tis thou alone guidest the cosmos, and without thee naught is risen to reach the shining shores of light." And he speaks of the grains and the burnished mountains and the bubbling streams, and I found myself singing America the Beautiful. So I read the first stanza here of America the Beautiful. "Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee," although she believed in her God, Catherine Bates, "and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea." It sounds very much like words that were used by Lucretius. And Catherine Bates wrote America the Beautiful in 1893. So I looked up what her history was, and she was an English literature professor at Wellesley and a poet. And I can't help but wonder if she didn't read Lucretius.
Lovely, lovely.
When I first signed up for this class, I thought, wow, Forrest is teaching a cooking class? Because I relate Epicurus because I have a cutting board in my kitchen that says Epicurus.
Yeah.
And it made me even more curious, but whatever.
No, there is that website called Epicurean, and you get recipes every day.
Right.
Yes.
Val looks at, and some of them she says.
I love it.
But as you know, that's not what Epicurus was all about. The Epicureans lived a very simple life. Not fancy food, not fancy clothes, not fancy anything. Very simple life that consisted of people like us getting together and talking philosophy.
It's
So how did that get flipped 180 degrees?
Oh, at some point in the Middle Ages, some monk or some believer,
rogue monk,
a rogue monk did it.
All right.
Not sure we know exactly who, but it happened then.
Okay, happened in the Middle Ages.
Jefferson developed Epicureanism at Monticello. You can see it in his buildings and his outbuildings and slave quarters and architecture and his farm books.
Okay,
And
well, we made
his
a good
wine
start.
cellar.
We made a good start, I think. I hope that you're able to, those of you, I know some of you have the book in hand and you can read books 2 and 3. I hope the rest of you can manage to get there somehow. So we'll move on to books 2 and 3 at our next session. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here and participating.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.